Today I'm going to be talking about what Trustly is doing to deliver a local payment solution, but do so for merchants who want to facilitate open banking payments globally. What really matters today is talking about how we're addressing all of the nuances associated with local bank payments. And talking about what Trustly is doing to deliver an open banking payment solution by adding redundancy and bringing in both direct debit and credit transfer payment functionality, while layering on top of it an elegant and consistent end user experience, adding a transaction engine, a risk engine, allowing for us to provide real-time feedback to a merchant, guaranteeing that payment so that regardless of what happens after the payments originated, there's no risk of non-settlement, no risk of payment fraud, as an example. So what I'll be talking about today is how Trustly is delivering all of that, embracing fully open banking APIs as well as local payment rails for merchants who want to leverage open banking globally. What really matters is, as you look at bank payments, they're not all created equally. You've got different user experience depending on direct debit or credit transfer. You've got differing transaction risks. This concept of non-settlement was unique to me until learning about how payments flow in Europe. You've also got the availability of local payment rails, the availability of instant versus the availability of non-instant. So what I mean by that is in Europe, you've got SEPA credit transfer, you got SEPA Inst as well, and that availability can be dependent on bank. In the US, you've got RTP. And today, that's only about 60% of the DDAs. You've got a competing rail coming, which will be fed now. That will expand the scope for instant payments. However, the treatment of, the management of those local payment rails will be so critical and very difficult to navigate as an organization. So, the opportunity, first, is to capitalize on open and online banking, to create a new payment paradigm globally, embracing those trends as they emerge not only in Europe, but across US, Canada, Asia-Pac. Leverage the local and legacy debit rails alongside the emerging instant rails as they become available. Using the RTP schemes in conjunction with open banking will establish a true alternative to the card schemes. But the challenge, is anybody familiar with Abbott Costello? It's a very US skit. But Abbott Costello are so famous for their Who's on First skit, creating a huge amount of confusion on who's on first, what's on second, I don't know is on third, tomorrow is on the pitching mound. But anyway, as you think about how you manage payments over local payment rails, how you leverage open banking country by country, there are differences on the country level, on the regulation level, over the payment rails, as well as just simple settlement. PSD2 has its nuances. It creates significant complexities, and right now the maturity level isn't quite there, so we've got PSD3 coming. Looking at the US, so far behind where Europe is from an open banking standpoint. So it's going to be really interesting to track how the US adopts open banking, how Canada adopts open banking. Does it look like Europe or does it look like something else? So with Trustly, we have an answer. We're delivering a single, consistent user experience across all geographies, addressing the local nuances of debit mandate or the payment flow on a credit transfer transaction. In addition to that, we can offer a low-cost, fully guaranteed payment. And in doing so, as a global payment company, we'll be providing global open banking payment orchestration. So what does it look like? By offering, and this is just a UK example, but by offering a combination of both a credit transfer experience over over faster payments, a direct debit experience over backs, we can present to the consumer a very elegant front-end user experience where it's really invisible to them on what happens behind the scenes, how the sausage is made, right? So if the consumer is present, we've got the option to facilitate that payment over credit transfer. With that comes log in to a redirect and a login to their bank account with Face ID or fingerprint scan. But also, if we're collecting debit mandate at the time of the payment, we can then store this method of payment on file and then optimize over either direct debit rails or over credit transfer rails, dependent upon what's occurring at that time of the payment. So how does it all work? Because the US market looks very different than the Canadian market, which looks very different from the UK and the European market. So the way that we are addressing this, and I'll use the US as an example, we've got the ACH rails, we've got real-time payments, which is launching with us this year. We've also got FedNow, which is on the fringe and looking at a 2023 launch. In Canada, you've got Interact, you've got EFT, you've also got faster payments, RTR, which is coming in 2022. In Europe, SEPA Inst, we've got Trustly's own credit transfer payment rails. In the UK, it's BACS and faster payments. They're all inconsistent in how they flow and what the end user experience looks like. So, what it takes to ultimately deliver that elegant payment experience to the end user, we're layering on top of these payment rails, as well as the open banking connections that we've established, a transaction engine, a risk engine, so that we can better route and ultimately intelligently route a payment over credit transfer or direct debit. But having that risk engine in place allows for us to facilitate a payment, take the risk of that payment off of the plate of the merchant, provide a real-time authorization at the time of payment request, which doesn't really exist today. So looking at the way that a payment flows in the US, you lose visibility into what happens thereafter. Same applies with any direct debit transaction in Europe, and even is not existent today with a credit transfer unless it is truly an instant settlement, but that can be held up by the bank. And it all comes down to the risk of that transaction. So by doing all of that, it's going to be then rolled out by Trustly under a single unified API for merchants to ingest. Doesn't matter if they're a US-based merchant, a UK-based merchant, a German-based merchant, but they'll have the ability to grow and expand and fully leverage open banking with Trustly globally. Having redundancy, and we're talking about bank payment rails, having redundancy is very important. And having redundancy is important. What having that redundancy allows for us to do is, in the event that we've got a payment failure over one rail, to have a fallback in order to ensure that that guarantee that we've provided to the merchant can still successfully settle. So just to give you a view, and apologies for the eye chart, to give you a view on where things stand currently with the landscape of instant payments globally, this is really the sun that we're following. So as Trustly is looking at the markets where open banking, where instant payments are available, we are a European and a North American company today with a presence in Australia. But the rollout, the maturity of instant payment rails is going to be very critical for our strategy long term, and really what we're going to be looking to embrace on a global scale: open banking and instant payments. So in summary, Trustly is capitalizing on open banking and online banking to create a new global payment scheme. We have an opportunity to leverage legacy and local debit rails alongside the emerging instant schemes. And we're doing that as a means to establish a true alternative to the card schemes. Thank you.